Ben Shapiro destroys transgenderism and pro-abortion arguments. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the context of this video. So this was in 2017. I'm pretty sure this was at a conservative sort of gathering where Ben Shapiro was there and answering questions. And this lady was like one of the only progressives probably there, if I'm recalling that correctly. And this video is really famous. It's got 6,338,318 views. It's got 154,000 likes and 15,000 dislikes. People are all about this. And then like the comments, people are simping for him in the comments. I don't really want to bother looking at that. I don't know. There's something more depressing about looking at comment sections where people are bigoted and transphobic than like watching just an actual conservative dipshit being a bigot. It's just that, like, you know, there are more people that think like this. Alright, Ben Shapiro destroys transgenderism and pro-abortion arguments. Let's go.
So, how do you say that some people don't have privilege when you basically just said that trans people aren't valid? They're not a thing. They're just girls pretending to be boys or boys pretending to be girls.
Okay.
Okay, the audio quality is a little weird there, but she's basically like, how do you say trans people aren't valid and that they're just boys pretending to be girls and girls pretending to be boys? Explain that. Okay, simple question.
Okay.
Also, this girl isn't media trained. She's just a random person asking a question. And yeah, the audience is probably all against her here.
But gender is a completely different thing.
No, gender is not disconnected from sex. So.
Yes, it is. Gender is disconnected from sex. Hold up, let me go get the source for it. I'm gonna get the BRB screen. Like, I know how to argue it, I just want to make sure there's a source behind it so people who don't get it can see it. So this is the APA, the American Psychological Association. This is a government organization site. Pretty sure this is a credible source. And we're going to look at what is the difference between sex and gender. Sex is assigned at birth, refers to one's biological status as either male or female, and is associated primarily with physical attributes such as chromosomes, hormone prevalence, and external and internal anatomy. Gender, hold on, let me highlight this now. Gender refers to the socially constructed roles, behaviors, activities, and attributes that a given society considers appropriate for boys and men, or girls and women. So notice, boys and men, girls and women. These are gender terms, and for sex terms, it's male and female. These influence the ways that people act, interact, and feel about themselves, while aspects of biological sex are similar across different cultures, aspects, and gender may differ. This is an academic source stating that the two are different. There's a way in which academics separate these terms, and it helps people be more specific when having conversations about this.
It's not completely disconnected, but it's still a cultural thing. It's still from society.
Okay.
Notice how he muted her mic. When he has control of the mic here, he can make himself look as good as he wants. So you could note it. Like, I'll play it again.
It's not completely disconnected, but it's still a cultural thing. It's still from society.
Okay.
She lowers down, her volume lowers down, so I get that they don't listen to academic sources, but if anyone's watching who's like on the fence, hopefully they listen to it. I really hope so. And there's lots more than just the American Psychological Association. There's actually a lot more, and I'll probably show them later.
No, it is not in the mind, okay? You're not a man if you think you're a man. And
yes, you are. Yeah, you are. If gender is an identity thing, and your gender is determined by what you identify as, let's think about Ben himself. I think that when he thinks of masculinity and his manlyhood, I don't think he immediately starts thinking about his dick. Personally, I don't think, especially when you bring up a new person's gender to someone, you don't start talking about dicks if you're introducing someone, and you just use their pronouns, and you just kind of look at them. It's just the way they identify and present, and that's what gender is. It's not just you have a vagoober or you have a peener. It's a lot more complicated than that. It's the social and cultural ways we present ourselves and express ourselves that determines our gender. And so there's technically infinite genders. This is a radical idea to some people. There's technically infinite genders in the sense that there's an infinite amount of fractions between the numbers 1 and 2. So in this example, 1 would be like male or men, and 2 would be women. There's an infinite amount of variety in between that someone can choose to identify between man and woman. They can identify somewhere between in an infinite amount of ways. I hope that makes sense.
Pretending, or if I did, I shouldn't have said pretending. Let me amend.
You said playing.
Okay, I said a boy who thinks he's a girl. That's the usual phraseology I use.
A
Not
boy
playing.
who thinks he's a girl. Love that language.
I usually say a boy who thinks he's a girl or a girl who thinks he's a boy, which is technically what we're talking about here. As far as the actual psychological
Did he also
issues,
say girl who thinks he's a boy? I think that's what he said. Maybe he misspoke. He's always trying to talk really fast so he sounds smart and people don't actually think about what he's saying. And that's kind of funny.
at play, it used to be called gender dysphoria or gender identity disorder. Now they call it
If gender is what's in my pants, then I guess I identify as Pokemon Omega Ruby. Wait a minute. I don't want to think about that.
gender dysphoria. The idea that sex or gender are malleable is not true. Okay, and I'm not.
So sex is, I don't know what he means by the term malleable. Even sex isn't binary. Sex is a binodal distribution. There's a thing. So even sex isn't binary. This is an article about that. I remember they had a graphic somewhere, but pretty much what the graphic is, I mean, this pretty much makes sense. There's things other than XX and XY, and this is what we use in a large sense to determine sex. There's other things, so by definition, it's not a binary. These other things are known as intersex.
Not denying your humanity if you're a transgender
Yes,
person.
the Voosh
I am
document.
saying
I'm
that you
using
are not
that.
the sex to which you claim to be. You're still a human being, and you're a human being with an issue that I wish you Godspeed in dealing with in whatever way you see fit. But if you are going to dictate to
Whatever
me,
way you see fit, except changing, except transitioning. Do it in whatever way you want, just don't transition. This leads people to commit suicide.
that I'm supposed to pretend that men are women and women are men, no.
No, that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about men and women being the same. We're talking about people who were men can become women, and people who were women can become men. It's a very different thing. It's quite the distinction. We're not saying they're the same. We're saying that they can change and be one thing and then be another. Just like with the numbers again, you can make the number 2 become the number 1 if you subtract 1 from 2. Then you get a 1. Same thing with 1 to 2, you can just add 1 and there, it's a new number.
The answer is no. I'm not going to modify basic biology because it threatens your subjective.
Biology. Okay, I have to go to like my internet history to find this graphic that I'm looking for, and my internet history might be I don't know. It might be a little stinky, so all right. Everyone pay attention. Genetics. If you didn't know, genetics is a branch of biology. Just look that up. It's a thing. This is a textbook, an academic source. Gender is not the same as sex. Biological sex refers to the anatomical and physiological phenotype of an individual. Gender is a category assigned by the individual or others based on behavior and cultural practices. one's gender need not coincide with one's biological sex. We just destroyed Ben Shapiro.
Sense of what you are.
Okay, but you're still saying these kids should like not be accepted because they don't really fit in either place. They can't just like.
I'm saying that the Boy Scouts have a standard. You must be a biological boy to be a Boy Scout.
Look at how he pivots. She's saying, wait, so you're still not, you're saying they're not valid and that they shouldn't be supported? And now he's talking about Boy Scouts. It's a different thing. Notice how he dodges the subject.
Have to be a boy to be a Boy Scout.
Where's that written though?
In the name Boy Scouts.
Yeah, a lot of transphobes were not good students. It's not that new. They're just, people are very ignorant of this for some reason. My parents. and then he said it's in the name Boy Scouts. Like that's an argument. People who weren't boys before but then became boys are still boys. So they can be in the Boy Scouts. They're not girls.
Because this is a very because for all of human history, boy meant boy and girl meant girl. Boy did not mean girl.
Nope. I learned about this from Vosh, and you know, I honestly don't know. I didn't fact check him on this, but I learned this from Vosh, and that's my source. Vosh said that in earlier history, they used to call all children girls. Like children from, 0 to 8 or something? They used to call them all girls. And then once the male children got to a certain age, they were called boys. And then once they got to another age, they were called men. So that's something I learned from Vosh. I'm just kind of repeating it here. And if that's true, which I'm gonna assume it's true, this kind of goes against what Ben Shapiro just said.
And if I call you a moose, are you suddenly a moose? Okay, if I redefine our terms.
Okay. This is the famous line, if the moose line. Moose, that's an animal, right? What it means to be an animal, a different species. Species have very rigid sort of things that define them. And so a human cannot be another species. A species is not a social construct. It's not something that associate with having different cultures and having different sorts of expressions. Species are species. It's very rigid in that sort of sense. We have very specific ways to identify them, and it's super different from gender, where genders can be so different across different cultures around the world.
No, yes, that's right. Men and women are a completely different thing. This is true. Have you ever met a man or a woman? They're completely different.
You can't just say you're a cat.
Yeah, men and women are different. That's not what we're arguing. They have different ways of being seen in society. That's definitely true, and that's not the argument. So this is a straw man fallacy.
It's not a thing. It's genders. It's not saying you're.
Okay, why is that? I don't understand. Why? Okay, let me ask you this. Okay, I won't ask you how old. I will ask you how old you are. Okay, because you're young enough that it's probably not insulting to ask you. So.
I'm 22, so I'm probably young and naive, right?
No. Why aren't you 60?
All right. So now he's conflating gender with age. So age is a physical construct based on biological. Over an objective amount of time, we determine what someone's age is. Time isn't subjective. Time is a social construct, but it's not something that can change if we all agree on the definition of time. It's a little hard for me to argue. Honestly, I'm struggling to find the words for it. But what I'm trying to say is that when we all agree with the 12-hour or the 24-hour system, that's an objective amount of time. And when 365 of those happen, that's what we call a year. When someone has existed for a certain amount of years, there is nothing that can change that. There is nothing subjective or different culturally to describe that or interpret that. It's time. It's not the same thing as gender. So you can't really conflate that. It doesn't work. It doesn't make sense. These are two very, very different concepts. She's saying it doesn't make sense, and people are laughing at her. So, again, this audience isn't really on her side.
Why can't you identify as 60? What is the problem with you identifying as 60?
Because it's not the same as gender. You can't just...
You're right. Age is significantly less important than gender.
No, she's not arguing about the importance. She's saying that the concept itself is not the same. It's not comparable.
You can't magically change your gender. You can't magically change your sex. You can't magically change your age.
You can still legally change it. People recognize
You can't legally change your age, by the way.
She's talking about gender.
You can change your name, you can change your sex, you can change your identity.
Just because you can do things legally doesn't mean that they are correct biologically. You could do lots of things in the past that were incorrect biologically and correct legally. For a long period of time in the United States, sterilization of the mentally ill took place. That didn't make it okay. Skinner versus Oklahoma. Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes wrote the decision.
Right. I still don't understand how...
And now he just said a lot of things really fast, and people like that.
It's not a matter of open-minded and accepting. I want them to get treatment that they see fit, but that's not involving me. The idea behind...
So what is the treatment for people who are trans? So what you do, if you have gender dysphoria, is you get a diagnosis, make sure you have it, and then you know, you visit some psychologists, therapists, you check all these out, and then you start getting like hormones and stuff, and you start pursuing the transition. Yeah, you get psychological support, hormone therapy, maybe you get like voice training, and yeah, that's how you get treated. That's the professional help that the medical consensus has agreed to. And Ben Shapiro out here is saying that you shouldn't do that, so therefore you shouldn't get treatment.
Transgender movement as a civil rights
It reminds me of like the fight the illness argument my mom likes to press, where my mom would tell me, yeah, just fight the illness, don't give in and transition, fight it, when that's literally the opposite of what the medical consensus agrees on you doing. If you were diagnosed with gender dysphoria, they will never tell you to do that.
Is the idea that all of their problems
depressed,
would just
go
away
outside.
if I would
Yeah.
pretend that they were the sex to which they claim membership. That's nonsense. The transgender suicide rate is 40%. It
Yes,
is 40%.
that is true.
And according to the Anderson
why
School
is
at
that?
UCLA, it makes no difference. There's a study that came out last year. It makes no difference.
He's
Virtually
not
no
answering her question.
difference, statistically speaking, as to whether people recognize you as a transgender person or not, which suggests there's a very high comorbidity between transgenderism, whatever that mental state may be, and suicidality. That has nothing to do with how society
Do you
treats
think
you.
it could be because of they're bullied at school?
No, I don't think that. I do not think that the discrepancy. First of all, I'm against bullying of any sort. Okay, the idea that somebody would beat somebody up is terrible. Okay, as somebody who's viciously bullied in high school, I'm not a fan of bullying. But the idea that the
I can
normal
see
suicide
why.
rate across the United States is 4%.
That was a
The
little
suicide
dumb.
rate in the transgender community is 40%. The idea that 36% more transgender people are committing suicide because people are mean to them.
Exactly. Dysphoria is what kills people. The feeling of like deep incongruence with your gender and your body, and the feeling that like everybody kind of hates you for it. They all think that you're kind of like mentally deranged, and just like the isolation and lack of people who accept you for that. That's what kind of kills people. Transitioning, I could speak personally on this. Expressing as a woman and living as a woman makes me so much happier internally, and that I wouldn't be the same if I didn't do that. I really wouldn't.
Ridiculous. It's not true, and it's not backed by any science that anyone can cite. It is pure conjecture. In fact, it's not even true that bullying causes suicide.
That's not true. We were just looking at science that contradicted what he just said.
A lot of studies. For example, in the black community, where the idea is supposedly that America is a racist society, blacks are bullied a lot.
All right, I think we get the point of this video. I don't really want to watch it anymore. I really don't. It's boring. He's not making any good arguments. We've kind of gone through each and every single one of his points so far. He's just a bad dude, and he doesn't really know what he's talking about, but he likes to act like he does, and it's just really boring and pathetic, and I just don't like it. This segment has gone on long enough.
Hamster